All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. And today, I had to do a new intro for this one. We are bringing this one back. This is an encore. This is one of the greatest episodes we've ever had because it has one of the greatest people that we've ever had. My dear friend, Jim Kwik. And this guy is a master at helping people unlock the superpowers of their brain. In today's episode, trust me, there are lots of tears and emotions. You'll learn the hacks to boost your reading speed by 25 to 50 times, how you can stop feeding your distraction muscle. I share with Jim how I used to feel dumb, how curiosity is the key to unlocking learning roadblocks, why learning without an outcome is useless, the story behind how the lighthouse was born at Jim Kwik's house. The lighthouse was actually born at Jim Kwik's house. Thank you, Jim. I love you. Thanks for being a friend. And why knowledge alone is just potential power. And so Jim is one of those men that you listen to once and then you listen to again and again and again and again. And that's what this episode is. And so without further ado, I'm going to stop bumping my gums and let Jim supercharge your brain. So let's get into the episode. Back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. This is a free-for-all Friday, and I couldn't be more happy, excited, exuberant, or superfraticagilistic, expialidocious to have today's guest. He is a machine in the best way possible, with one of the biggest hearts ever. He's somebody that I call a friend, a mentor, a teacher, somebody that I would stand in a fighting hole with day after day for all the right reasons. He is an absolute muse when it comes to memory, the brain, and helping people unlock all of their potential. So today I would like to welcome, with the biggest warm welcome, Jim. Welcome to the show.
George, thank you so much. And I feel the same way about you. A good friend, mentor, someone I would definitely go shoulder to shoulder to battle with. Thank you. Thank you. And everyone who's listening. This is a long time coming, man.
It is. I remember those nights in your apartment. It was like 1 a.m. and we were working on the podcast, like back in the day before it was like the top podcast in the world. And I cherish those moments. Like those are some of those memories I look back on that I'm glad that I remember.
Yeah. That's what memories are about. So, and so I really appreciate your time, your talent, your real treasure, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners know.
Thanks, man. I'm going to frame this conversation. I'm going to get the waveform printed out and I'm going to write those words above it. I'll put it on my That was good. I'm a words of affirmation guy. So like you're like right there where it matters today. So I'm honored to have you. I'm sitting out here looking at a snowstorm and I always ask this question, and I know a lot about your story. I know a lot about your journey, but I think it's really important that we unpack these things. And so the first question I always ask everybody is, when you look back at your career, and I mean, you have done everything from coaching A-list celebrities and athletes and actors on memory to healing your own brain, learning that learning was a superpower that could be learned. And you've been all over the gamut. But when you look back over this entire illustrious career of experience, where do you see one of like those biggest pivotal mistakes or moments that was made? And then what did you learn from it and take forward?
Dude, wow, what a great opening question to chat about. We're not one of those light conversations. Well, I mean, through my adversity, I've always seen adversity kind of almost as an advantage. I'm a big fan of the superhero archetype and the journey and hero's journey. And, you go from this kind of ordinary world, get introduced to an extraordinary world, and you face dragons and demons, and you get a mentor, you find your Yoda or your Miyagi or someone along the way. And at some point you come back and you share that elixir or that treasure with the rest of the world. And so I would say I've had a number of those moments now, over 3 decades of my career. And what difficult time was, as many people, it was this, in 2020, most recently, I think a lot of people could obviously, we have a lot of these struggles, but hopefully some of these struggles led to strengths where a lot of people thought maybe 2020 was a year to get everything they wanted. And I think a lot of people found that they discovered that they appreciated everything that they had, and that was definitely for me. My, one of the difficult times was, and again, I have hundreds of them to be able to pull from, but was the launch of the book Limitless. It was my first book, and you and I had brainstormed a number of things just earlier in that process. And, I waited a long time to kind of put out my life's work, and I wanted it to be something special. And when it came out, my first book, obviously, we're at the height of a pandemic, and it was in April of 2020, and everything went wrong, in that process. I had 34 speaking engagements, ones that, like South by Southwest and Milken Conference and Bulletproof Conference, those kind of things, and 100% of them were canceled. I had this nationwide book tour canceled, and just everything was just not one thing. You have a plan for things, and just like you just kind of have to rewrite it. And as people say a lot, they have to pivot. For me, there was I believe there's a quote in the book that you came across when you read it, is from a French philosopher, and he says, "Life is the C between B and D. B is birth, D is death, C, life is choice." And then I really do believe that these difficult times, they could define us, or they could diminish us, or they could develop us, what we decide with the choices we make. So the choices I made when that happened was to change everything, to really refocus, not have a kind of pity party, and just really see where things are going, reach out to our community, move things to digital and more remote, where we have remote virtual book parties and tours, and spend more time on our podcast and our social media. I'm really a live events person. You and I have had the opportunity to share a stage multiple times, and I really feed off of audiences and their energy, and just everything about that. So it was a change, but a change for the good. We were able to do more, reach more people during that time, because I wasn't on planes. You and I, we used to travel all the time, right?
Yes.
And and there's sometimes I'd be on 3 continents in a week, and there's no way I could sustain that, and thinking about all the different cities I had to go to, but being at home remote and be able to do an Instagram live or Facebook live, or jump on a podcast or something like that. It was just be able to reach more people without having to pack and go through airports and unpack and go to hotels and sleep in weird environments, and that I'm not familiar with, and everything else like that. So it built, and I feel like that it end up being a success by the way, anyway, we kind of measured it. Very fortunate to come out of it, where the book was an instant New York Times bestseller, #1 on Wall Street Journal and across the board. But it was a lot of work, but it was a labor of love, and I just think that sometimes we think about what gets me through it, and having grit was just purpose. I really feel a moral responsibility of helping people because of the way I struggled with concentration and distraction, and labeled broken, and just not being able to understand things, and this imposter syndrome of trying to look smart but not really feeling like I was smart. But now I just I'm really driven, and I have this unlimited amount of fuel and energy. It has been good. Even the past, I've had very bad sleep issues, as well aware. Sleep apnea. It's like a physiological breathing disorder where I stop breathing 200 something times a night, and would wake up suffocating. And not traveling has actually been really good for me to rest, and be able to replenish and recover. And so you always try to find the gift in it. I don't wish things were that they are right now, but we control the controllables, right?
Yeah.
We control our focus. We control what these things mean. We control what we're going to do. We control even how we feel about things. And so, and then just like, I love the metaphor of a lighthouse, man. I just feel like that we could be an example, that the life we live are the lessons we teach others, and we could be a lighthouse for other people who are going through storms in their life, who are going through some foggy times, some darkness. And sometimes our scars end up being a lighthouse for other people also as well. And
Yes,
so,
sir.
yeah. So
I love that.
that's why I appreciate everything. You're so giving, with your time and your talent, and just, and like attracts like, and that's why I love being here with you, with your community.
Yeah, man. I'm actually probably gonna get emotional. A lot of people don't know, like, the times. What I love so much about you is, even from the day that I met you, and we'd met many years before we became close, like quite a few times, but when we met, like, your just ability to be so authentic and transparent while also still committed. to the vision was something that really like resonated with my heart. And for everybody listening to this, like there was a point where my wife was about 7 months pregnant and I was a couple weeks away from bankruptcy at one of the biggest pivots in my life. And the man on the other end of this podcast is whose house I was at, that was there at that pivotal moment of my life. And the lighthouse was born that day, my friend. Here we are quite a few years later. Um, but it's always been, you've always led me by your ability to like love both the world and what you do while also witnessing the journey that you're in that superhero archetype. And it's something that I admire so, so deeply. And it gave me a permission slip a long time ago to really own that story, like the way that you turn your adversity into power. And as Uncle Jeffy says, right, I've had all those moments as well. And we were talking, I was talking to Jeff Spencer the other day, and he's like, that anxiousness, that feeling is just because you're lacking clarity. And he's like, and so you be with it. And so I've always loved your ability, Jim, to just be. I watch you witness and be self-aware and then choose. Like that's one of the best analogies I've ever heard, like the B, C, and D, and the choice is what's in the middle. And it's something that I've witnessed you do. And so I just want to say congrats on the book. It's really like full circle watching it go. And I know Clay and you and everybody else was out there and watching it go in the world. And then all my students and people like, do you know, Jim, this book I can read? I'm like, I do. I'll send them a text every time that you say this to me. And I love it. So thank you for putting that work into the world. I know what goes into a book. I know what goes into the marketing of a book. I know what goes into that whole tour. And one of the things that I really think that you did in that book is you gave people a permission slip to be themselves and also start to realize that we're the ones that are ultimately responsible for our creation of our brain, for our superpower, for what we do. And one of the things that I learned from you, and you said this very early on when I heard you talk, is like you had to basically make learning a skill. It was like a muscle. And I struggled for years as an entrepreneur when I got into this world. I'm like, how do they remember so much? Like, I can't even read a book. I can't make it through 2 pages. Like, I'm just destined to be like this and destined to be like this. And it was through you that I realized that as long as I chose to pursue something different every day, to read something, to pick something up, to train that muscle, that I could literally become anyone I want. And you put me through this exercise one day. We were somewhere and you were like giving me this visualization to like remember names. And I watched you remember like 100 names off the top of your head. And as a guy that had brain injuries just like you, it was really profound. And so, you know, what I would love, and this is one question I'm going to selfishly ask you because I got to start with me, is like, I love reading now. It's something that I picked up after I met you. I read all the time, but there's this thing that happens when like I go to read a book or listen to a book. I can't make it more than 10 seconds without my thoughts like chasing. And then I'm like, wait, do I read the page again? And then I go back and read it again. And I feel like I can't concentrate. Can you unpack that for me and help me?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely not alone. I think if anyone's listening to this, they can relate to this. They're like, I thought I was the only one. But we know that, I mean, I would imagine a lot of people who are here with us, they had the experience where they read a page in a book and then just forgot what they just read. And their mind wanders. They have trouble concentrating. And one of the reasons why I feel like is just because 2 reasons. Number one, we're driven to distraction with our devices. You know, we're always flexing that distraction muscle where we're always going from Slack to, you know, texts to social media to all these different things. And, you know, our attention span, some people say, are shrinking and getting smaller. But besides that, some of us, when we're studying something, sometimes we're processing it too slow. And it's possible that we go too slow. And it's kind of like, I don't know, riding a bicycle really slow. If you're riding it really, really slow, you start to wobble and you could even fall if you're going too slow. And the brain, we know, is this incredible supercomputer. But when we read or we study something, you know, we're feeding it so like one word at a time, you know, and metaphorically, we might be even starving our own mind. And if we don't give our mind the stimulus it needs, it'll seek entertainment elsewhere in the form of distraction. And it's kind of interesting because when you're going really slow, like you're driving really slow, and as you know, you're in some town in Montana, right? You can be doing 5, 6 different things when you're going super slow. You could be drinking your coffee and texting and, you know, having a chat with somebody, thinking about something else. But when you're racing a car, you're not doing those. You're not trying to multitask, right? You're thinking of the act of driving and what's in front of you. And you're not thinking about the dry cleaning or something you have to do with clients. And part of the reason is the speed directs the focus. And because there's focus, you have concentration and you have retention and you have better understanding and comprehension. And so sometimes we're going too slow. So part of it is we need to stop flexing our distraction muscles all the time, and exercise some kind of control, or at least balance it out with some kind of meditation or something else that would build your concentration, your attention span. The other thing is maybe we need to go a little bit faster than we're used to. And then the other thing is, I'm obsessed with this answer, is the third bonus answer, everybody, is to ask more questions. We know that our minds, primarily it's a deletion device. It's trying to keep information out. There's a billion things we could be paying attention to at any given time. So we're trying to kind of filter it all out. And what we let in are the things that we're interested in and the things that we have inquiries about. And when you ask a new question, you hijack that part of your brain called the reticular activating system, RAS. But people should know that from marketing. I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening also, in terms of your customers or your prospects focus. But when you ask a new question, you let certain things in, and then you start seeing those things everywhere. As anyone who's ever bought an outfit or bought a car or whatever, they start seeing that thing everywhere. It's always been there, but we deleted that. Remember that's part of that billion stimuli we kept out. And so the things we let in are asking questions. And I feel like sometimes when we're learning something, we don't have enough conscious questions that we're asking about of the material. Questions like, even like, how can I use this? Why must I use this? When will I use this? And be obsessed, because then the content acts like, kind of like, this question's like a magnet. And it's just like, oh, there's the answer, there's the answer, there's the answer. And those questions direct your focus, and it'll hold your concentration far longer than if you're asking, if someone's asking, am I really getting this? Or what's this person doing? And your focus gets hijacked somewhere else. So I would say train your focus, because it's a muscle. I would say, be wary that maybe we're learning too slow. Maybe we could go a little faster to maintain our concentration, to keep it interesting to ourselves. And then also ask more questions, and ask and you shall receive.
Wow, that's amazing. I just had Near Ayal on the podcast, right? And we talked about
Mm,
distraction, and obviously you know Near, so that one is completely covered. But what you just said, Jim, is really interesting, because I'll be reading and I'm like, oh, I have to slow down so I don't forget. But I'm actually creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I'm going slower, and then I'm allowing myself to get distracted out of this FOMO of like, I'm going to miss something or I'm not going to remember something. But I know exactly what you're talking about, because it's like you hit that moment where you're like, oh, this level or this speed
yeah.
requires my full focus. And I feel like what's happening for me is I'm not maybe present or intentional enough when I'm reading, because I'll send time to like, I'll default to it as like a checkbox. Like I'll be on a flight and I'll just be like, oh, I should read instead of I want to read. And then I go in with this slow speed. And so, okay, it's a muscle. I get to practice, I get to flex, I get to be
And I
intentional.
love the word you use, get. It's not got. It's a lot of people say, I got to pick up the kids, I got to work out, I got to read. But when you change a little change of languaging, from got to get, all of a sudden you have gratitude, and it just feels completely different. And so amazing. And I applaud you also, because it's one of those things where gratitude, I feel like, also for the beginning of learning, sometimes we need a little chaos. We need to understand. Just another thing people could do, just to stimulate questions, is to maybe just scan the material first, because it'll give you a nice overview of the content. And then when you're scanning, you're looking at graphs or headlines or whatever, you never know what it is. So you start to ask questions, of yourself unconsciously. So then when you actually read it through it slower, then it's like, oh, there's an answer. So maybe creating that structured chaos in the beginning by scanning will actually spark questions.
Mhm.
And so when you actually go through and read it, you'll be like more grounded and more focused.
Yeah, it's like speed dating, right? For reading. And this is something that I didn't understand. And I think, Jim, one of the things that I mean, you really helped me kickstart a few things. But even in the beginning, when I started reading, I was like, I have to read every book and I have to read every page. Like it was like this very rigid, and it has to look a certain way relationship with reading. But now there's plenty of times, and through a lot of coaching, like I've been coached on how to read, and they're like, if you're not interested in it, don't try to force it, because you're
Yeah.
not going to retain it, right? And like I love that idea of like, hey, pick it up, grab some sections, go around, see what piques your curiosity, and then dive into the book. Which leads me to a question about reading and retention. And I don't think I've ever talked about this. This one is, little bit of humility here. So there's a part of this where like on paper, I'm a successful entrepreneur, right? Like I'm really good at marketing. I'm like the Queen's Gambit with marketing. Like that's what I see. I was so glad when that movie or that show came out. I was like, guys, that's what it looks like in my brain with emails, with social media. Like that is what I see. And one of the things that comes up is I've been coming across this lately, Jim, where I have like friends send me like, hey, read this book or read this from this psychologist or boom, boom, boom. And I'll sit down to read it. Within the first like 3 paragraphs, I feel like dumb. I was like, I don't know these words. I don't understand the context. And I find myself like trying to read it like 3 or 4 times to understand, and then I'll get frustrated. And I'm like, I really want to know. But when you're talking about the dissonance of middle America post industrial revolution with confirmation bias, I was like, can we use English, please? And I'm trying to figure out now what are some tools or what are some ways, like when I get hit with one of those
Yeah,
roadblocks, like, do you look up the definition of the word? Do you break it
yeah,
down? Like, I would love some tips on that.
yeah. I think talking about speed, reading something faster that you don't understand won't make it any easier. If somebody doesn't understand, whether it's neuroscience or French, speed reading, it's not going to help that process. There's a book. It's maybe a little bit probably hard to find. It's called Understanding. It's interesting, and it's going back to it. Everyone contributed. A few dozen individuals contributed from their point of view what it means to understand something. So they asked someone like David Blaine, a magician, what does it mean to understand something? Or they went to Frank Gehry, a world famous architect, and say, what does it mean to understand something? And it's written by a man named Richard Saul Wurman. And his name sounds familiar. He's written almost 100 books on information management. He's the creator of TED. So he created TED, the whole thing, and later Chris Anderson bought it. But so he got a number of individuals together and saying, what does it mean to understand something from your point of view? And so it's an interesting book, and I'm sure some people, we could find it online. I contributed a chapter when it came to memory, because he came to me as a memory expert saying, from your point of view, we don't really understand something unless we can recall it, right? And so, I gave some insights on that. So going back to your question, I would say that first, I love that we could have curiosity about this instead of as much judgment, meaning sometimes instead of judging ourselves, if we take a pause and a breath and got curious about it, I think that the curiosity could lead, where the latter with where we're judging ourselves maybe could, hurt our self-confidence and everything else. But the former will actually, when you're curious, it'll lead to some more self-awareness. Lead to even more self-confidence when we don't judge ourselves and instead get just a little curious of why it is the way it is. And knowing that we could do anything, but we can't do necessarily everything. And then what I've learned, even with the research of the book Limitless, is that these limits are learned. And the good thing is they can be unlearned. The limits of our mindset, the limits of our motivation, limits even in the methods that we're using. Some people listening might be using old methods for marketing, right? Methods that won't work today because they've been tried and no longer is true with the current environment. So sometimes we have to up level our skills, and maybe bigger conversation is, that we shouldn't be shrinking necessarily our goals and our dreams to meet our current reality. Maybe we should be expanding our capabilities and our commitments, our curiosity to be able to meet those bigger dreams. Whether it's, whatever their goals happen to be, whether they're financial, their health or relationships, their reading speed or anything else. And so getting curious is a nice framework instead of judging, because the studies done in self-compassion saying that when we're kind to ourselves and more understanding, we're more likely to follow through, as opposed to we have that kind of, self-destructive or that kind of, where we're really hard on ourselves. And then I love getting curious over like things like definitions. That's why we spend time in our programs and teaching people how to learn vocabulary words, because often the vocabulary words could be a significant part of understanding. If you just could define a lot of these words that we didn't know before, we'd have a greater understanding of that chapter of that audio book or that physical book that we're reading. Um, I'm a big note taker, so I'll actually, if I need to, if I'm reading something very technical, I use a visual pacer when I underline words. I find that it greatly can enhance anyone's focus and their speed, and because their focus is better, their comprehension will be better.
Mhm.
Not going down a page, but just underlining everything, not actually inking up your page or touching the screen on your digital device, but just like right above it, using a visual pacer will boost anyone's reading speed approximately 25-50%,
Wow.
just right off the bat without any kind of training, because our eyes are attracted to motion. But I'll often read when I'm reading something technical with like a pen, and I'll underline words that I don't know yet, to come back to. Or, if I feel inclined, I mean, nobody, there's no rules on this, right? We could take a break right there and just go online and look up that word, and that's the other thing. We know monks can meditate on a paragraph or just a word for an inordinate amount of time. There's always more comprehension, right? So the other thing is, thinking is good, but overthinking and wanting it to be perfect. Nobody has perfect comprehension of everything and
Mhm.
perfect retention of what they're learning at any given time. And sometimes the fastest way to learn something is just not to read it at all. If we find out that this is not getting the outcome that we want. But I find that a lot of people don't have an outcome for when they're learning. If they're listening to this podcast right now and they don't have certain questions or an outcome to be able to be reached, it's cliche, but often it's true. Like most cliches, you can't hit a target as you can't see.
Mhm.
And so having an outcome, I tend to map out, I don't see things like you do, maybe on the ceiling, chessboards, metaphorically, like yours, whether they're funnels or anything else like that. But I do have a mind map generally of the things that are important for me, where it's my current level understanding, where in the middle, I'll put something like health and wellness. Right. And then as spokes or branches that come out of that core tree, the different forces that lead to that. Maybe it's nutrition, and off of that branch you have food, and off of that branch you have, keeps on going down to micro. I find that is very satisfying to my whole brain, meaning that it's not something that's I could scan in or I could scan out, but I could see relationships together. And so these are the kind of things I'm looking for as I'm reading to make it a little bit easier for myself. I'll take notes. I'll look up words, and I'll use memory mnemonic tricks to be able to memorize those words. We get our students, whether they're elementary school or junior high school students, or medical students or whatever, doing 10 words a day, 10 minutes a day, using these kind of fun memory tricks. But yeah, it just knowing that it's not fixed, like just like our mindset, it's not set like our shoe size, that our memory and our intelligence has growth potential, but it requires discipline, it requires training, it requires, like anything worthwhile, dedication. But
Mhm.
the bad news is it takes effort, but the good news, it doesn't take as much as people think. And it's certainly a lot more fun when you're doing it in these kind of whole brain methods instead of rote memory, where, the kind of stuff that you might have done as a kid, where you're just
Mhm.
repeating something over and over and over and over again until your brain just yields to like boredom and submission.
Yeah, and Jim, this could be. I'm glad you have a hard stop because I have like 64 open loops right now that
Okay.
I want to pull, but I'm going to pull the ones that are important to me. One thing that you said is you said curiosity, right? Like
Yeah.
this ability to be an inquiry. And what popped into my brain was that, there's these times where I'm romantic about how I've done it, even though the method might be old, just simply because I haven't given myself the time to be curious or explore. Like it's born out of insecurity for me, right? Like I've done it this way so many times. And so then I get rigid and I'm like, this is the way. But really, just simply going through the lens of it, like that could be a way, but how else could it go? Like what else is there would help, expand that capacity to meet that bigger goal instead of shrinking down. And so that one landed for me very, very intensely in a good way. And then the other thing is when you were talking about this, I actually remember now, like I'll be reading or I'll be talking to you and I'll hear you use a word. And the moment we're done, I will go look up that word and I'll probably use
Yeah.
that word 1,000 times in the
Oh,
next
wow.
until it's gone, right? But until like I kind of warn its welcome, but then I really kind of remember it, like I embody it. Like I'll remember, I'll remember like when I found out what pedantic meant, right? And then
Mhm.
my wife, after like 30 days, she's like, you cannot use that word again. Like not
You're not
everything
allowed.
is pedantic. And but that's how I like kind of learn,
Yeah.
right? I'll grab it up and then I'll use it, I'll figure out where it matches and where it doesn't match. And so those were two really big takeaways for me. And then the one that I think is so powerful that you said is the reading with intention, like having an outcome. And we
Yeah,
talk about this everywhere. And there's so many times where I've found myself going to read because I was actually using it to distract from what I knew needed to be done. Right. Like
interesting.
it was like, oh, I'm going to go read. I'm going to go learn something. Well, learning something doesn't create consistency on what my promised deliverables already were, right? I'm not going to learn something that's going to help me over deliver. And so that outcome based and that intention is really, really huge. And I'm now like linking about like, oh, I can go be like, hey, I have an hour today. My intention's just to go learn something random and be curious. And then it's like, oh, I want to go this. I'm going to go look at Limitless to remember some of these, brain games. And adding that outcome just seems like it's such a massive needle mover with such a small level of input or
Yeah.
planning. Like it seems like the ultimate cheat code here. I'm gonna steal that one.
No, I think the power, I think intention matters with everything. Even if
Yeah.
people want to remember people's names, a lot of people never have the intention to. They never
Mm-hmm.
make the decision up front that this is important to be able to show that you care for somebody. And I think just even without using any technique, mnemonic device or visualization, just or even repetition, if you just had the intention of showing this person that you care, and instead of maybe ask, sometimes when we're faced with a dilemma or some kind of decision, most people we go to, what do I need to do? Oh, I need to
Mm-hmm.
remember this person's name. But maybe a question to get curious about is, instead of asking first, what do I need to do? Asking yourself, who do I need to be at this moment?
Mm.
Who do I need to be? Meaning that if I was caring, or compassionate, some of those behaviors happen naturally in a relationship or even online. And I think people could feel your intent. One of the questions I get a lot is just, they see me with certain celebrities or what have you, and people ask like, how does that happen? And first of all, I would say a lot of it happens with a bond of learning.
Mm-hmm.
They have a love for learning, and they get attracted to my work because they are maybe where they are as an athlete or as a singer or performer, because they are constantly learning to grow, right? But also like reading, right? But maybe also it's because I don't have any agenda. Talking about intent, where they're used to a lot of people having an agenda or wanting something from them. I sincerely just don't. And that this happens, these are famous examples, but I think, especially in the beginning of our relationship, you were such a giver, and without looking, you gave not to get, you gave because it was who you are. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that really makes people feel safe, even in marketing, as we're putting our marketing caps here. And certainly, we have bills, and we want to be able to use money to be able to grow and further our mission. But when you're there to be able to serve, I feel like that puts that intent matters,
Yeah.
and people could feel it. Especially now, people are extremely sophisticated in their communication now, and they could feel the slightest incongruency.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the
So
things that, and thank you for that. I actually remember, I remember when we bumped into each other before we were close at Bulletproof, what booth we were in front of,
yeah,
and what our conversation was, and who I was standing with, and who you were with. Like I remember all of it, and I even remember being like, "No, man, like I just want to help. Like can I just help?" Like, but it was always just like connecting on the human level, which is so massive. But it actually brings me to something else, and um, which by the way, people ask me the same thing, like, how do you know Jim? I'm like, I just think Jim's like one of my best dudes in the world. Like, I just want to drink coffee, hug him, and sing Kumbaya. Like, yeah, it's great. Like,
yeah,
he's the brain master. I was like, but it's just Jim. Like, I'd let
yeah,
him babysit my kids, and Branson would run up and play with him, like, and stand in front of the massive, whatever size, Incredible Hulk that was at your house, which was like 16 feet. And it's funny, Lindsay and I we were cleaning our phones out the other day, and we had the photo at your house of us in front of the Iron Man statue
yeah,
doing
yeah,
the
yeah.
doing the Iron Man pose. Well,
And just for people who are listening, who are just like, I'm a kind of like, I have this my kind of my homage to superheroes, just because, growing up with three traumatic brain injuries before age of 12, being bullied for my learning challenges and labeled, that wasn't, I didn't have quite I had a good childhood, but it definitely had its moments. So now I kind of relive it today. And superheroes for me, as you know, they represent something to me because I couldn't read for a few years like all the other kids, and I taught myself how to read by reading comic books. And something about heroes, they just show that you're the one person can make a difference. They give you hope in dark times, and a superhero is just somebody who's discovered their superpower and developed it. They've worked, hard for it, Batman or Iron Man or whoever, but then they don't just have a power, they use it to serve. And
Yeah.
I think, now we need more of those. So that's why I collect these little superhero things to remind me that I even have like this portrait of Stan Lee for people watching us on
Oh
video. It's
wow.
uh
Yeah.
it's made out of candy, and just remind me of talk about imagination and being limitless. He had two passions. In his later years, it was passions throughout his whole life. It was he would he'd love telling stories. He'd still in his late 80s still go to work 9 to 5 and just tell stories. And his other passion was his wife.
Mm.
So when you think about like limitless, what's truly limitless is there's no limit to our imagination, like he's
Mhm.
demonstrated. There's no limit to our creativity. There's no limit to human connection and our ability to come together in difficult times. There's no limit to human, you know, our ability to persevere. And so that's really what it's about. Even when the book came out, my publisher was like, "Hey, why don't you want to delay this?" I was like, "No, this book is more than just a book on teaching people how to speed read and learn languages and remember names. This is a book about, managing your mind in times of crisis. It's about how to support your kids if they're out of school. It's about how to, regain your focus and your flow if you're working, at home, with all the crazy distractions." And so
Mhm.
anyway, I think everyone who's listening to this, especially entrepreneurs, like they're modern day superheroes. They solve problems, they create jobs, they move the economy. And so I appreciate everybody in the cape that they wear.
Yeah, I got to give homage to my buddy Alex, and Alex Sharfin. He says it best. He's like, "We're the ones that are crazy enough to go out into the future, design what it looks like, come back into the present, and build it into existence." And I was like, "That's
Yeah.
that's a superhero for me." I agree. And just so everybody listening, like just to give you a frame of reference, like I'm short, I can just jump really high, or used to be able to, but like Jim doesn't collect little things. Like this thing was like real life Hulk. Like it was like standing next to a T-Rex, and it makes me happy thinking about it. Oh my God. One of the threads that I keep hearing, and this is a really good reminder for me, is that my brain and our brains are no different than any other muscle in our body. Like if we ignore it, it atrophies. And if we use it and we respect it and we have temperance and we treat it well and we help it recover and we stretch it and feed it and hydrate it, that it becomes better and better and better and better over time, over and over and over. And as somebody personally, mine as well, with 7 traumatic brain injuries in 3 years, and bleeding on
Yeah.
my brain and fluid on my brain. And I mean, I've done everything. I've done every therapy you can imagine, scans, I've done stem cells, and nothing ever compares to like the daily intention that I give to it. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I struggled with, Jim, is that once I got my memory back and I was using it, I almost took it for granted again. I almost forgot that it used to be a quote unquote struggling brain. And I was like, oh, well, I can run a 5-minute mile an hour. I can run 20 miles, so I don't have to run anymore. And it's been this
Yeah.
new pursuit of like being proactive and preventative as well. And so I've learned a lot from you, but I have people ask me all the time, like, what are some really important and pivotal practices that they can do every day to like flex their brain, increase their memory, anything that you have that like really helps people be intentional and move that needle?
Yeah. I'll give a handful of ones I recommend people take notes. Just want to remind everyone there's a learning curve, but there's also a forgetting curve. Sometimes
Yeah.
we do read something or hear something on a podcast, and research suggests that within 2 days, just 48 hours, upwards of 80% of it could be gone. That's why it's so important to take notes and really ask these driving questions. How can I use this? I'm so obsessed. That's like one of my dominant questions. How can I use this? Why must I use this? When will I use this? Because as you know, it's you can't just get fit by reading a book on push-ups, right?
Yes.
And so you have to do the work, and knowledge alone is not it's not power. It's potential power. It becomes power when we apply it. You can read all the marketing books and have these conversations, And so how do you do that? A few things I would recommend. Um, the nice exercise that I started to do with clients, especially during where people are physically distancing themselves, is people are complaining that their memory, that days would blend together. I don't know if any of your listeners or viewers here could relate to that. It's just
I
like
can.
time is going by and they just don't even know what day it is. And one of the reasons from a memory standpoint is because we don't have those distinctive, unique experiences as we used to. Maybe you're not going out to dinner as much, or going to concerts, or going to parties, or going to the movies, or going to watch a play or something like that, a comedy show or anything. And maybe if you are physically distancing yourself, the days tend to blend because it's kind of the same. And so a quick exercise that only takes 3 minutes to do is every night is just to take 2, 3 minutes and just review your day. And this is something called your episodic memory. Your episodic memory is the episodes of your life. So if you have trouble remembering what you had for breakfast, or what you wore that day, or who you talked to, then this is the principle. And there's always a promise behind every principle. And the principle is there is no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's a trained memory and an untrained memory. As you mentioned, people want to go to the gym, but you don't go to the gym once and you're physically fit for life, right? Your muscles, they respond to novelty, they respond to nutrition, they respond to rest, right? But you need to do your brain, your mental muscles. Like, you want your physical muscle to be stronger and more energized, more flexible, more agile, faster. You want your mental muscles to be, you want your memory to be sharper, right? You want your thinking to be clearer. You want your mental endurance. You want to get rid of that brain fog. And so you need to be able to exercise. And one of the great exercises at night, just review your day, and you won't get it perfectly. If you can, talk to a partner or a family member, or even talk to your plants or your dog or your pet, and talk out loud, because they call it the explanation effect. When you learn, and you learn with the intention of teaching somebody else, you explain it to somebody else, you learn it way deeper. I'm not sure if you had this experience, but you were already a world-class entrepreneur and marketer. And when you started consulting and work in teaching and speaking on stages, and doing like live raw, like hot seats, which is not easy to do. I've seen you in your element, where many people, they don't do that because they don't feel prepared, but you could just like, and just like handle it right there. And not many people do that, because I believe that, all that preparation of everything you've done to that point shows up, for you. Like we were talking right now, before we started to go recording, like neither of us kind of, rehearse or anything else like that, because we've done the work, right? And we're in the moment, and I think it shows up. But sometimes we forget, what happened throughout the day. And one of the things you could do is just to talk to somebody, or just in your mind go through and just walk yourself through that day. And the more you do it, after a few days, it gets easier and easier, and you start to build it. And the reason why is not just to remember facts and figures and whatever you're remembering, but just remember your life. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is because my grandmother passed of Alzheimer's. And it was really hard to see her go, because this was like when I was like 5 or 6. She passed when I was 7. And that's when I had my first head injury when I was 5, and I was labeled broken, and I had these challenges, and she was taking care of me. But then, if anyone knows anyone who suffered from dementia, she would call me by my father's name. She would repeat something she just said 30 seconds ago. And, and when you're a child, you don't understand this. So it leaves an impression on you, especially when you're going through your own issues. And then where she was taking care of me, I was taking care of her. And that's why we donated 100% of the proceeds to Alzheimer's research for women, and her, in memory of her, and education initiatives, building schools for children in need. But we do it because of this mission. But going back to this, part of what helps you remember is, like, when people lose their memory, they lose their humanity almost. They lose like that thing that binds, who they are together. And that's why it's a great exercise to do. It only takes 3 minutes. Might be a little bit hard at first, just like doing some burpees or some jumping jacks if you're not used to it, but be consistent and it gets easier. Another thing I do for my brain that's really can move the needle for a lot of people is obviously prioritizing your sleep. And that goes without saying, especially, when you're stressed. It's interesting. Neuroplasticity actually has been shown to happen when you're sleeping. Just like when you don't build a muscle when you work out. You build it when you rest, right? We know that. But same thing with your long-term memory and all your memory muscles. Neuroplasticity is happening after you give it novelty and you feed it nutrition. It happens when you sleep. So really prioritize your sleep. And I know you probably have had experts talk about this, and we've done multiple podcasts on optimizing sleep. One of the things I do fun before I go to sleep that helps me sleep, as I mentioned, I had a lot of like stress around it because of my breathing disorder, and I would have to wear CPAP and all this, really sexy stuff to go to bed with. I would actually do this gratitude thing where after I go through 3 minutes of what my day was, I'll pull up 1, 2, or 3 things that just were really special. And that gratitude has been shown to put you in a rest and digest, parasympathetic mode for people who know that. And it just helps me to just connect with myself. I also do this kind of gratitude thing where I just go down, scan my body, toes to the top of my head, and just be grateful for those, parts of my body. I think if people want to feel wealthy, that if you don't want to feel desperate and trying to need something, start from a place of wealth, because our thoughts are like the language of our mind, but our feelings are like the language of our body. And if you don't want to feel separate from what you want out there, maybe just feel gratitude for all the stuff that you do have, and it creates a great foundation. And one of the ways to feel wealthy is just, I'll do an exercise at night, which is still good for my mind because it'll help it give me, like wind down a little bit and just say, like, what are all the things I have in my life that money can't buy, that I wouldn't trade for millions of dollars, right? Relationships, or your ability to breathe, or be able to see these little things, right? Which are the big things. And then I don't know if you ever experienced this, George, but you have to get up like particularly early and you set an alarm clock, and you wake up within minutes of like 4:30 or whatever, or seconds even. And that's the power of your mind. That's the power of setting an intention, even unconsciously before you go to bed. And what if we use that same potential to be able to introduce a new question, something maybe that you want to solve, maybe in your business, maybe a new way of innovating, maybe something personal in a family. You want to be able to come up with a solution for something, or a decision you need to make. What if you pose that question while you're in that relaxed state of awareness before going to bed, and you tap into the same potential as your ability to wake up within moments of an alarm going off? What if you ask yourself that question and not ruminate over it, but really, think about it and then just kind of release it? And then we find that one of the best ways of amazing ways of innovating is through our dream states. And we don't have to go through it too much, but I write in the book that when I was doing research for it, that Mary Shelley came up with the idea of Frankenstein in her dream. Paul McCartney came up with the song Yesterday in his dream, right? A chemist created the periodic table, the whole framework, in his dream, because your brain doesn't shut off at night. It's actually more active. And what is it doing? It's going after those learnings, or those whatever you worked on all day or studied all day. And so the first thing I do for my memory when I wake up is I remember my dreams. I go through and I decide to remember my dreams. Like, I set an intention that I'm going to, when the night before, that I'm going to have great dreams and I'm going to remember them. I just make sure also I write them after I, get up. By my bed, I have a gratitude journal and a dream journal, like 2 journals by my bed. So it's very easy. I think it's so important. We've all heard the phrase, first you create your habits, then your habits create you. Right. I think it's so important for habit. And we do a whole chapter in the book on, creating habits and breaking old habits, is to make the things that are good for you easy, and to make the things that are not good for you difficult. Right. It's kind of like, if you don't want to touch your phone that first half an hour of the day, like that we talk about, because it rewires your brain for distraction and reaction and all that stuff, then just not having the phone there, or having an analog clock, it just makes it easier because you set it up. If you go to a restaurant and they put bread right in front of you, that's like, you have to, it's easier to say no once, like, no, thank you, as opposed to saying 50 times in my mind, no, I'm not gonna eat that bread. No, I'm not gonna eat the bread. But setting up your environment to be good for you. That's why I have my dream journal there and my gratitude journal there. So it's easy for me to do. I have a fiction book by my bedstand. I don't read at night nonfiction because I don't want to get in my executive brain. I don't want to read books on marketing and neuroscience. But I find that what helps me relax is light fiction reading. And I want to remind all our entrepreneur friends who do already read a lot of nonfiction books to read fiction. There's a real benefit for reading fiction books. It's something that I resisted for a long time. My books are primarily 100% nonfiction books in every category you can imagine. But taking time, it's actually been shown to boost your EQ, People talk about IQ. We don't hear a lot about EQ, emotional intelligence, your level of empathy, your storytelling through narrative, which is so important for marketing and, and building, as an entrepreneur, to be able to imagine and create. And I believe these are the real limitless things, because there's no limit. Limitless is not about being perfect. Limitless is about advancing and progressing beyond what you believe is possible. And the things that are truly limitless are the things that aren't going to be outsourced to a machine. They're not going to go to a computer, AI and automated. There's no limit to our creativity, no limit to our imagination. The things, I believe the future belongs to the creators, these entrepreneurs that are thinking in different ways and, looking at things and asking new questions. And so these are some of the things that I do, and I'll remember my dreams. And I think it's a great exercise, because we'll probably spend a third of our lives sleeping. But actually you could be able to tap into that, dormant potential. Has a lot of treasure there as well. And then a couple of quick things, first thing in the morning, I'll hydrate. It's so important, but you can lose up, they know this, but they don't, if they're not acting on it, you can lose up to a pound of water through sleep. Respiration, perspiration, and just staying hydrated is shown to boost your reaction time and thinking speed upwards of 30%. Just staying hydrated. I mean, that's insane. The first thing I'll do in the morning is I'll make my bed, take 2 minutes. And I've been talking about this for decades, but it's just how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Excellence is a habit. So train yourself to do something excellent in 2 minutes, and then you'll more likely take that excellence into other areas of your life. Plus, your brain loves a clean environment. Loves a clean environment, and so it really thrives. Your external world is a reflection of your internal world. But we have a lot of these tips, online, obviously, in our podcast and other places. But I could geek out with you so much.
No,
about
I'm gonna respect your time. We're about a minute over. I'm gonna say this again. If you're listening to this or watching this, you need to go back and listen to that last 15 minutes on repeat, because I'm going to. Like, Jimmy, you packed 5 hours into the 10 minutes, and it was so perfect. It was so perfect, and a lot of it was really helpful for me as well. It's really, really powerful stuff. So I'm going to say this because I want to be respectful of your time, Jim, and for everybody here. Just for everybody listening, I would highly recommend getting Limitless, the book. It's Jim's book. I've read it numerous times. I've gifted it to so many people. And I'm kind of like having a proud daddy moment, because I was there on day one. But go listen to Jim's podcast, the Kwik Brain podcast. It is amazing, and it's designed for you to listen to it, get you set up to win, and go implement it. It's not like 10 hours of talking. Like, it literally is training your brain and programming your brain to win with like the world's best brain coach in your corner, because it is him. It's his voice, leading into it. And so it's called the Kwik Brain podcast, the Limitless book. So Jim, I just have one last question. It'll only take about 10 seconds. It's an absolute honor and gift to have you on the show. I'd love to have you back. We'll do another one, and I can't wait to see you again soon too. But one question I always ask every guest is, everybody listening right now, if you could tattoo one thing on their soul, one takeaway, one thought to remember, one belief to remember, what would that be?
Wow, one belief. I'll go there. As I mentioned, one of my modern day superheroes is Stan Lee. And I've told you this story before, but he wanted to choose another modern day superhero, Richard Branson. They wanted to meet. And so we go to dinner, and I pick him up, and in the back of the car, Stan, I have Stan. I was like, I have to ask this. You've created all these amazing superheroes. Who is your favorite? He says, Jim, it's Iron Man. And he says, Jim, who's your favorite superhero? And he has a Spider-Man tie. And I said, Spider-Man. And without a pause, he goes with his iconic voice, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And I still, to this day, truth be told, sometimes switch words around when I read or I hear, maybe from my challenges with my brain and everything. But I heard something different. And I said, Stan, you're right. With great power comes great responsibility. And the opposite is also true. With great responsibility comes great power. Great responsibility comes great power. When we take responsibility for something, we have great power to make things better. Instead of blaming and complaining, I want to remind everyone, we can't be upset by the results we didn't get from the work we didn't do. And blame and complain and excuses, it just wastes an immense amount, besides the fact the person probably doesn't want to hear that, or maybe they're even happy for you, that uses an immense amount of time and energy that an entrepreneur needs a reminder that we need to feed our business before it feeds us, right? And sometimes you have to do what other people won't do so you can have a life other people can, have. But it starts with taking personal responsibility. And when we own something, own our mistakes, own our learning, own that the past, helped to shape our environment, who we are today, that we are 100% responsible for our life today and moving forward. And I feel like that all great progress starts with personal responsibility and ownership. And that's why one of the reasons why I respect you, like we connected so well, because it shows, when people take ownership and they're not looking to put it outside of themselves. When you have the agency here, then you have the great power to make things better. And I wish that upon everybody who's listening right now, is that wherever you are in life, just if you look back, just do so, because it's just seeing how far you've come, and how much you've learned. And if you're struggling right now, I wish you that so much strength right now, and that you inspire people with your grit and your grace, with people who are watching. And again, these difficult times, the goal here is, let's not shrink our dreams to meet this current situation. Let's really expand our mind, expand our discipline, or expand our capabilities, our training, to be able to meet those grand dreams that we desire and that we really deserve, all of you.
Well, I'm gonna go journal, and I'm gonna have a tear. And I'm gonna
Can I
text you
challenge
later.
everyone to try something right now, George?
Please, yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
take a screenshot of however you're engaging with this right now, and tag George, tag myself on social media, and just put one thing you're going to do for your better brain. Just one thing. Maybe it's prioritizing your sleep. Maybe it's not to eat that fried high sugar foods. Maybe it's just be mindful of your self-talk. Maybe it's introducing one small, simple habit, because I believe the key here is that knowledge by itself, again, is not power. It's potential power. It becomes power when we work it. Is to do one little thing. I call it a small, simple step, S3. What is a tiny little action you could take right now? Because one step in another direction can completely change your destination. So write that in your post or online, wherever you put it, tag us post so we see it. I'll actually repost some of my favorites to our community. And I'll actually gift out a copy of the book to one person at random, just for being playful and curious.
I love it. I'm not going to touch that. Everybody go do that. Screenshot it. Tag us. Tell us the one thing you're going to do to feed your brain. Jim will share it. I'll share it. Jim will give you a book. I'll give you a book, and anything else that I can think of. So, Jim, from the bottom of my heart, brother, it was so good to have you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And for everybody
Appreciate
listening,
you, buddy.
go find Jim on all the interwebs. He's pretty easy to find. Jim Kwik, Kwik. The book is Limitless. The podcast is Kwik Brain, Kwik Learning. You'll find him everywhere that Google can help you find him. This was another episode of Free for All Friday on the Mind of George Show. Remember that relationships will always beat algorithms. And until next time, I will see you in the next episode, or you'll hear me in your earballs. Bye. Oh, thank you.